All right, folks, we're going to get to the Malzberg panel, the much-anticipated Malzberg panel, in a second. First, I want to tell you about the great new book by Newsmax contributor and political analyst Dick Morris. You know it. It's called Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. I strongly urge you to get a copy of this #1 Amazon bestseller. You go right now to powergrab411.com and get your copy now. That's powergrab411.com. All right, commentator on religion, society, and pop culture, and the author of You Don't Have to Be Wrong for Me to Be Right, Finding Faith Without Fanaticism, Brad Hirschfield, and columnist at Breitbart.com and American thinker, C. Edmund Wright. And gentlemen, I welcome both of you. Let me start with you, Rabbi. This revelation yesterday on Sean Hannity's show by the Ferguson police chief that indeed they are looking into possibly prosecuting the stepfather of Michael Brown for incitement or some such crime based on what we had shown over and over again. When the grand jury verdict was announced, he was hugging Michael Brown's mother. Then he turns around with his pants down below his waist and starts talking about let's burn this bitch down, and said it repeatedly. And then, of course, there were riots and fires. Whether or not he was directly responsible, I don't know. And then there were those I've seen on TV all day saying, well, even if he did it, even if you can do it legally, you know, it's not the right thing to do. Where do you fall in?
Look, not the right thing to do, meaning what he said.
No.
And I know what they meant, but I couldn't disagree more. I believe in free speech, but that doesn't mean unlimited speech all the time. The guy incited violence, right? And that's why we have to be very careful. I would not compare what he's doing to what, like, the Rams 5 did, right? They're very, very different. The guy got up and said, burn this blank down. He asked for violence, and he got violence. There's got to be some accountability for that, I think.
Edmund, I got a feeling you're going to agree.
Yeah, although I don't agree that there's that much difference between what the Rams did, given their place in society, and what this basically unknown stepfather did. The fact of the matter is, Steve, we know the First Amendment protects the right to free speech, but it does not protect the right to yell fire in a crowded theater. I believe that's written by one of the justices. And that's exactly what this guy did. He in effect, yelled fire. In fact, yelled start a fire in a crowded theater, a crowded township.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting. I want to go back to the Rams. You know, I was at the Monday Night Football game last night, my son and I watched purposely and intently as the players came out of the runway and the tunnels. And I was really hoping. I was hoping to see 5 white players come out and pause and maybe do something like, if the camera could come on me, maybe do something like this, like take a, you know, say something like, you know, stop, and I'm get the camera there, stop, you know, freeze like this, in support of law enforcement and Officer Wilson. And I'm sure that the NFL, Edmund, would have said, hey, our players have a right to express themselves. My butt, they would have. They would have fined those guys in a half a second.
Yeah, look, you have the right. You can't exercise all of your constitutional rights simultaneously necessarily. You have the right to play in the NFL if you're good enough. You also have the right to express your opinion. Doesn't mean you can do them at the same moment. And that's the NFL knows better than this. The Rams know better than this. Coach Jeff Fisher knows better than this. They're just frightened of a players' union that's largely African American.
Right, and Rabbi, there are limitations. Every workplace puts limitations on all their workers. There are things you can't say, I can't say. So why on earth is the NFL condoning and allowing this when they won't allow certain celebrations after a touchdown in the end zone?
Right, look, there are always workplace limitations. I frankly wouldn't make this about race. I would have found it much more powerful if 5 black players had come out and done exactly what you did, Steve, because this isn't fundamentally about race, and that's one of the mistakes. We shouldn't fall into that trap either.
But isn't it? I mean, isn't it really fundamentally about race? Wait, Edmund, let just the rabbi go, then you'll go.
No, I hope it's not. And actually, David Brooks wrote today in the New York Times, I think really wisely, it's much more about issues of economics than it is about race. I think that has to be addressed. I think there should be accountability. I think if any one of those 5 players had come out and said anything in support of the lawlessness, the violence, the danger, the burning, and the looting that went on in Ferguson, I would slam them down in the end zone as hard as they slammed down the opposing. But they didn't do that.
But Edmund, they did say that they were showing support for the community. And what has the community been doing?
Yeah, well, right. that whole hands up thing, that's a battle cry. It's a racial battle cry now. And I hate to say that I'm disagreeing with David Brooks here because I disagreed with him when he said Obama's pant crease guaranteed he'd be a great president. So I don't know that that's supporting your case very well.
Well, yeah, Rabbi.
No, again, I don't want to make a debate about David, not about David, and who's going to be right about that. I actually think, though, to the extent that that symbol is allowed to be owned by any one community, we're making a terrible mistake. The bottom line is that was speaking to a kind of rage. Acknowledge it and move past it.
All right. Well, guys, we'll reconvene in just a few minutes on the panel. But coming up next, you're going to talk about a columnist for the New York Post who has a very interesting take on this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you back, and the panel rejoins us. Part 2, as they say, commentator on religion, society, and pop culture, and author of You Don't Have to Be Wrong for Me to Be Right, Finding Faith Without Fanaticism. Brad Hirschfield, I get choked up whenever I say the name of that book. And columnist at Breitbart.com, an American thinker, and author of WTF, How Karl Rove and the Establishment Lost Again. And you know what WTF stands for. I can't say it, but, look it up. Anyway, so get Edmund's book as well. And, okay, let me start with you, Edmund. Jeb Bush, I almost said George Bush, he had a few things to say, and one of the things he said, and there's all kinds of speculation, he's going to throw his hat in the ring, and he said basically that Republicans have to lose the primary to win the general. Now, literally, you can't do that. If you're Jeb Bush and you lose the primaries, you're not going to be in the general. But talk about the message there, and do you agree with it?
Yeah, this is exactly how Karl Rove and George Bush and Jeb Bush and the Mitt Romney and John McCain and the Republican establishment keeps on losing. If you go back to 1980, 84, 94, 2010, what we thought in 1988 about George W. Bush, it's clear that when the Republicans are on the right or appear to be on the right, and in 88, George H.W. Bush kind of rode Ronald Reagan's coattails. That's when the Republicans win. When we do what Jeb Bush says, like 92, 96, 2008, 2012, that's when we get crushed. He could not be more wrong.
What about it, Rabbi?
Boy, we just come at this from totally different
I
perspectives.
love it. Go at it, baby.
And I hear what you're saying, Edmund. I think the issue, is here when conservatives do it. No. When conservatives do it without integrity, they get crushed. But I think the real danger here is that the Republican Party in the first part of the 21st century could end up being like the Democratic Party in much of the latter half of the 20th century, preferring ideological purity to actual victory. And I think whether it's in politics or pretty much any other field, what history shows us is that if you can you have to have integrity. It's not about bargaining away what you most deeply believe. Core values have to be in place. But when any group becomes overly puritanical, especially in the United States, where people want real principles and a level of openness, you can win.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Edmund.
Yeah, you really do sound like David Brooks, mimeograph. I mean, for crying out loud, we just saw supposedly puritanical Ted Cruz government shutdown destroy the party. The Wall Street Journal called him the minority maker. How did that work out in 2014? Actually, what people crave is leadership. They crave people who will take a stand, who will plant a flag. And I'm sorry, I can go through every single election since 80, midterms and presidential, and destroy your case and prove mine. Every single one.
And Rabbi, let's just go back to McCain and even Romney to a great extent.
Yes.
I mean, McCain ran just the way you wanted to, and the base stayed home. And if the base stays home, you're not gonna win.
Well, actually, I don't think that's what McCain did, but that's what's interesting. I think both McCain and Romney tried to pivot in ways that weren't true to their form. Where Edmund and I absolutely agree, without the language of who's destroying who, because who is that going to really help? Where we agree is that leadership is the key. And I think you're absolutely right that we have not yet evolved leaders who know how to have real leadership demonstrate real leadership, speak with real integrity and principle without going to extremes. But you're absolutely right. We agree 100% that people do crave leadership. They crave authentic leadership. They crave principled leadership. And they want that to be exercised in ways that ultimately will bring people together. Ironically, I think that is exactly how President Obama promised but didn't deliver, and how he rode, for whatever weird reasons, to a victory he should have had.
Let me ask both of you real quickly. Number 2 in a CNN poll is Ben Carson, believe it or not. And I say that because that's the highest he's ever been. Edmund, in about 15 seconds, realistically, what are his chances if he runs?
Now, he's going to have a buzz, but he won't win. And polls at this stage, Steve, are typical. They're meaningless. They're only name recognition. His name recognition is high right now. Mitt Romney's is high right now. It's probably going to be Ted Cruz when it's all said and done. Mark it down.
I hope you're right, but I don't know. What about it, Rabbi?
I'm not going to handicap it, though. I think, Edmund, you're right again. It's a little early to tell. What I do think is important is when people start screaming about racism being everywhere in this country, look at that poll. And that's one of the places where people who may not agree with anything Ben Carson says, but they may want to take stock of what they think about this country.
But you watch. It'll take the media 4 minutes to come up with, I don't know that there is any, but they're already trying to get dirt on him and criticize him, and you'll have the left come out and say he's not really black. Guys, thank you. We're coming back with more. Don't go away.